So, welcome, friends, on behalf of Crystal Clarity Publishers, Ananda Sangha Worldwide. Welcome to our Material Success Through Yoga Principles discussion. My name is Swami Narayan, and I serve with Crystal Clarity. And my friend, and our guest with us today is Roy. And Roy, would you like to briefly introduce yourself as well, and how you came to be, inspired around material success through yoga principles?
Sure. I think the best way for me is to say that I came to Ananda the day after the fire. So it was to me it was a blessing. One, of course, to meet Swami, and secondly, to be here at that time, because what I was wanting to learn in my prayer to Master was that I needed to have someone that could actually be walking the path and show me all the things that we have read or we wanted to experience. And Swami and what he always said to us is, I'm your friend and I'm your guide. And that has been my relationship to Swami. It's now been over 40 years. Actually, it's been maybe close to 50, but that's been my relationship. I came to Ananda for the spiritual benefits of the community. So I came from a business background. I was in sales with a large company and then quit because I wanted something different. And I come to Ananda, and Swami in January, he created or wanted us to create businesses. So I joined in that creation with Arjuna, who did the construction company. I did the cabinet shop along with that. But what's interesting is that I came for spirituality. Swami put me back into business again. So sometimes our karma is different than what we think it is, and it actually was really appropriate for me, because I started to have to learn how to do business again in a different way, a spiritual way. I had to take the teachings, which there was only the Raja course at the time, and Swami, of course, was writing the path. Take what was there and try to learn how to apply it in the everyday life of running a business. And I had 4 other fellows working with me and doing the various things that we were doing. So here I was thinking I'm doing spiritual, and what Swami said was, yes, but we also have to have the material because we're rebuilding the community. So it was a perfect balance. What happened also to me is somewhere, because it was 4 or 5 years, what happened was somewhere in the middle was like, gee, I really wish Swami would have written all this stuff down, because we were all doing a thing, but it was actually perfect, though. We were all doing it, but we were doing it through attunement to Swami. And the more you attuned to Swami, the more you felt through that intuition what was dharmically right to do and what needed to be done. So it was a blessing that way. But later on, when he did write the Course in Material Success Through Yoga Principles, he added a lot more that all of us learned. Some of the things I didn't know that existed, and I've learned also from them. So it's been a perfect balance for me. And through the years, I've shared that both in the community by running businesses, and also spent time out in the world being the chamber director of chambers. So I've tried to apply both in a spiritual environment as well as in the material or the worldly environment with all that. So that's my background with all this.
That's great, Roy. So, one of the things I heard you sharing there was that the balance of your spiritual life with your material needs, and the way that Swami helped you integrate them, right? I think a lot of times we can feel like our spiritual life is over here, and then we need to make
Mm,
moves over here, that they're separate. But your experience with Swami, I think, was very much the opposite, that it was integrated, that you were taking like the course, your material success through the spiritual principles that you learned from
Right.
being with Swami and being a part of Ananda.
Yeah. I've always, uh, both working with Swami and also being in the community and observing, because you have to do both. I've always seen Swami just not be, in one compartment, whether just it's all spiritual or it's all material or it's all mental. Because, when he's writing books, I would say that'd be mental, but when he's spiritual, which is in the teaching and sharing with us, and of course, building Ananda was very much a material, because he built a physical organization. And he said, says, I'm no different than a CEO running a large organization, and the ad organization kept growing and building. But what I noticed all the time with him was that he was completely balanced. There wasn't any strain, whether he had to make a material decision about Ananda and the growth and development, or whether he was sitting and talking with us on some spiritual level that also pertained to the material and the mental and that. He never shied away from it. He just always was balanced in that whole process. And I think all of us who were there, and also the people coming now, have seen that about Ananda. It's what Master called a well-balanced success, and it encompasses all three aspects of our life, which is the body, mind, and soul. It's just not one compartment. And of course, the difficulty or the challenge that we all have is, how do we integrate it? And how do we, go to work and bring spirituality into our work? And then how do we make or help how does our work help us to develop and become more devotional? And Master, of course, addressed that issue. And I think that's what Swami was really trying to help us with, because
Yeah,
that's what Ananda is. Ananda is Ananda is a complete path, meaning that it involves all three aspects of our life.
I love that approach that you were sharing, that it's a holistic balance, body, mind, and soul. So I think that's one of the first questions that we want to be discussing in our material success through yoga principle conversations here. What is true wealth? And maybe that's one of the answers that you gave, is that perfect balance. If our life is completely invested in the physical reality and in making money, but we don't have our health and we can enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
We don't really have true wealth. We have an out of balance nature. So how, from someone that is coming onto the spiritual path, how would you convey the answer of what true wealth is? And maybe you could take us a little bit, share from your perspective on that balance approach, or anything in that
Right.
regard.
Yeah. I had a very interesting period, and some may have this and some may have it in a different way. When I started working for the large corporation, I was what they call a sales rep, and I had all the New England states and New York State. And I was calling on very successful men. At the time, there was very few women, because this was back in 1973. So what I started to do was, you make friends, because that's how you're selling, especially as a sales rep. You're making friends with everybody. And part of the friendship is we got on to life. And we start talking about what success was, because I was young and I wanted to be where they were at in a period of 10 or 20 years. And they started to say that, yes, I'm very successful. And, of course, they have the wealth and the things that come along with that, but I'm not happy.
Wow.
And that was my same thing, because here I am young, and someone is now sharing with me, who's 40, 50, 55 years old, that very successful materially, but I don't have that balance of happiness. And somewhere along the line, we started talking about peace of mind. And they said, I don't know what it is, and I don't know where to find it. And of course, I'm young enough to understand some points because I was, I was on the spiritual path in a sense. I read the AY and I was meditating and doing the basics as we all do at the beginning. But I could understand what they were saying, but I had no answers at all. I was just a neophyte in the whole thing. But I realized that that was my life path. That was there for me to understand that and then to take back and share that with others. So what I've understood that wealth is this accumulation, whether it's money or whether it's energy, whether it's the success in life that we have, that there's an energy flow that we develop, and we develop the confidence that we can do that. So wealth, when we talk about wealth, it's usually we just talk about it in terms of money, or material things. But wealth actually has, on the spiritual part of the thing, has much larger understanding. And then when I was thinking about this, because when we talked about this earlier, was the wealth and the success, I kept trying to separate them and make them into two different things for the talk. But actually, I ended up saying that you can't have wealth without success, and you can't have success without wealth. They do fit together. So wealth is what happens, that's that end result. That shows us that what we're doing is actually, in a directional sense, that we're right on target. But success is the daily stepping stones that we do, that we have to put into place every day of our life. And that encompasses the material aspects, or the principles that we have. And it also encompasses the mental effectiveness, which is being able to do the right thing, and the spiritual, which is the contentment, which is peace of mind and happiness. If we put those together in a well-balanced way, then we have true wealth. If we just put it together like most of us are taught in the West, if we just put it together with the aspect of attaining material wealth, and then I'll think about happiness and peace of mind later, we end up being 40 or 50 years old, and we end up, in ill health, or the business failing, or all those type of things that happen to us, and we're not happy. And I've met so many people um, that are highly successful, but very few, I would say, that are happy. Swami talked about something that I only experienced once, was the person that's highly successful will take you around and show you all the things that they consider their success. So I was a chamber director in a city, and the fellow was a $40 million multi-millionaire, and he owned quite a bit of the city, the buildings and that. And he didn't own the city, but he owned the physical parts. And I remember one day meeting him, and we had lunch together, and then he drove me around, and that's what he did. He started to show me the property, the buildings, what his ideas were, and he was probably 65, 70. So this was his life accomplishment. And it was actually exciting for me, because in the back of my mind was that thought that Swami put in there, that's what they're doing, is they're showing us. But he didn't have the happiness or peace of mind. He was kind of an old grumpy type guy. I loved him because he was fun, and that I enjoyed him, but he didn't have that person that I would hang out and learn from, because he didn't have the balance. And I think that's what this whole thing is about, is somehow in our growth and development, if we're one-sided, like in the West, which is only material, we actually have to have the other, or we're not going to be successful. Even in the sense of the high successful of materialism, you have to have that aspect of the mental, which is being able to do the right thing, and that comes from intuition. And you have to have the spiritual, which is what we're talking about, is the yoga principles in action. you have principles, but it's so easy to fall into being adharmic or not righteousness or not doing the right things which benefit everybody and it just benefits you. Most of the time, that's what we're doing when you're dealing with people. You have to be so aware of the intention behind their decisions
Mm,
because their intentions are usually what's in it for me. How do I manipulate this to in order to be successful, but successful for me, not for the whole organization or that. So when we talk about the success and we talk about wealth, that's part of really knowing that we're highly successful. You look at Swami's life, although he says he never made enough money, but he actually did. He just gave it all away, and he
mm,
built a community. So whatever he needed, $40,000 or whatever it was, he'd write a book or he'd do something, go on a tour, and that. So he knew how, and that's what prosperity is. He knew how to use his will to gain what he needed.
yeah.
But he always gave it away, and that's the other aspect of what wealth is wealth is accumulation, but it's an accumulation to serve. It's not an accumulation to put in the bank and say, "Look how wealthy I am." It's a way that we use that energy to help people, to serve people.
Mhm. That's beautiful. And Swami's life was that
Yeah,
expression, like you were,
yeah, yeah,
of giving, a sharing, and never hoarding. And that would probably be the opposite of wealth, that hoarding, also because it's emphasizing our little self, right? It's
right,
emphasizing our identity with our ego, and the yogic principles that we're talking about, of course, are, as Yogananda put it, self-realization with the capital S.
yes.
It's interesting that you brought up balance in Autobiography of a Yogi. I'm sure you recall there's that part where Babaji talks about the blend of East and West, that the material efficiency of the West with the
Right,
spiritual efficiency of the East will come
mhm,
together to form this golden middle path. So that's
right,
really what we're talking about here with material success through yoga principles, is the golden middle path where
mhm,
we can acquire, like you said, what we need when we need it through our God-given, our willpower attuned to the divine will, and use it for the benefit of others. So I wonder, in Swami Kriyananda's book, Money Magnetism, Roy, he talks about what is true wealth.
mhm,
And in there, he was saying essentially what you were just sharing, that it's the consciousness. Wealth is the consciousness of abundance. So how do we get into that flow of abundance? Well, especially if, like you were saying, Swami would attract money. He did have that money magnetism, but it
mm,
was for the good of growing the community, of serving his fellow man. So I think the Lord responds when one has that noble intention, like you were saying, what's really behind it, where most uh, material success courses or approach to money magnetism, it still has that post of ego that it's coming back to, how much you can acquire, how
mhm,
much, how much you can make so that you can sort of prop yourself up. But the difference here we're talking about is the having the true wealth of the consciousness, really, that we are a child of the infinite. And Yogananda said in one of his affirmations, "Thou art my Father,
mm,
everything."
right.
So I wonder if we could talk a little bit about how do you strike that balance, right? How do you um, find that golden middle path in your life? What's worked for you to balance spirituality and your material needs, and how they've kind of blended? Are there any things that have helped you, Roy?
That actually brings up the incident that when Swami had us create businesses. Most of us created our business, whether it was Arjuna with the construction company or the electrical company. Jaya was doing the painting and supporting Arjuna. I did the cabinet shop. And Arjuna was drawing, most of the people went to work for him. So he had about 20 fellas. And we were all there serving. But what was happening was that we all started with little things. You know, I had my first cabinet job, and I did that. Arjuna had his first house. Finally, he went to I don't know how many banks, and finally he got a loan to build a spec house. And I think he went to 12 or so banks to finally, get one. I mean, not get one, but get a loan so he can build the spec house. So what Master says is that we have to keep every day doing something that we haven't done before and do it. So what happened to all of us is that Swami says, let's go do businesses. And we all started at almost like a 0 point. We had some money, we had a lot of energy, and we had some understanding of the path and the spirituality and the balance. And because we came from more of a material background, Arjuna was a good contractor, and Jaya was just very centered, and I think it was Muktan and Narada, who really were very good electricians. So we all had that skill, but now it was how do we put it all together to make it work? And that's what we were doing. So every day we were all challenged. You had like when Arjuna was building the house, he started with the foundation, then he taught the crew how to pour cement and concrete, how to do the subfloor, how to build the whole house. So once he got one done, then he went on and he had 2 houses that he was doing at the same time. And the cabinet shop, I started out doing one job and eventually was doing one a month. And what I had to do was I had to do 4 cabinet jobs a month in order to bring enough money in because I had 4 fellows working. So you have to start small, and you have to almost every day be applying, introspecting and applying what you're doing and what you're learning and correcting that. You can't wait till the end of the year to correct it. You got to correct it that night, and you got to do some planning that night in order for the next day. And I remember I used to say this in a silly way, was that I'd go home at night and I'd read all these cabinet books and go the next day to teach the fellows how to do what was ever. But I was learning myself too, as well as I was teaching. And I think every one of us was doing that. So that's part of the flow when you build a business. So that's part of life when you take on a job, is you have to have both of those going on at the same time. You also have to be meditating, because that's where the balance point comes in. If we rely just on our material part of our being, we have just that, but we don't have that balance, which is the influx of intuition, the energy, and that. So when we're out there, what gives us the confidence, like Master says, that he was attuned to the Heavenly Father, and he would pray to the Father, these are my needs. I'm willing to work for them, but this is what I have to have, and this is what I'm encountering. And he said that what made it work was he had confidence in the guidance of the Heavenly Father, or in a sense, God. In our case now, we would say God and Guru. If we're not doing that, then we're back to being a 1 horsepower type of person. We just have the material. And it's okay, but it doesn't really give us that well-rounded, and doesn't give us the power that we need in order to make these things work, to accomplish, to serve. So that's so important, of that balance of that. So every day. Now, here's another interesting factor that I always thought about during that period. we didn't have meetings, like, everyone gets together and we talk about, we didn't have satsangs. Every day we just went to work. It wasn't with just, there wasn't, and there was only 20 of us in the community at the beginning after the fire, maybe 22. But it was more of learning how to do these things from attunement. And
Mhm.
if you stayed attuned, which is attunement to master and an attunement to Swami, then it flowed. The ones who didn't have that, you saw, became, in a sense, out of balance, and a lot of them left because of that. It's so important to have that attunement, and that attunement comes through meditation. Even if you're only meditating, which at the beginning, that's all we were doing, was about a half hour a day, a half hour in the morning, a half hour in the evening, especially when you're in construction, because we would leave the farm at 6 o'clock or 6:30 in the morning. We'd be getting back at 6 o'clock at night. And by the time you have dinner, you had a little meditation and then you're to bed because you're exhausted because you're out there physically. So, but having even that little bit brought a tremendous balance to our life. Had we just did it from the physical point of view, I don't think we would have been that successful because of that. And I think that I remember when I took over Ocean Song, Swami would bring a group in because we had a big enough piece of property and a house that he would bring people over for a weekend of relaxation. We always were excited because Swami was coming and we get to meditate and they were tired. So they'd come and we'd have like a half hour, an hour meditation, and we were expecting more. But Swami says, no, when you're working for God, that's just as good. And then we were, because this was back in 1980, 81, people were still putting out tremendous energy in order to build and grow Ananda, as well as we still didn't have homes yet. Homes didn't come along until 83. So we still were living in teepees and yurts and bread trucks and all that. Um, but they were working because we were at Oceanside, which was on Bodega Bay. They were working very hard in the community to keep that flow of energy going. So I think, again, the thing that I felt all the way through is there was never any sense of negativity. There was not a sense that um, it wasn't that the abundance was there, but there was a sense that we could do it. And I think that's where Swami gave us the confidence. And I think that is so important on this path and that's where Master comes in, is that because we're a child of God, that potential is part of ourselves. That's part of the soul. We can do it if we feel we can do it. Now, we may have to struggle a little bit to get to that point of success, but yet it's all possible. And also, God's going to help us. I can't tell you how many times I didn't have an answer and I didn't know how to do something. I'll give you one example. Arjuna wanted a brand new front door, a very elaborate front door, for one of his homes. And he asked me to do it, and I said yes. And then I realized, out of saying yes, I had no idea how to do it. And but anyways, it was about a month or 2 months away, and I was getting magazines called Fine Woodworking, and one of the fine woodworking magazines was a fellow that said, I'm going to show you how to build a front door. So he went from A to Z on how to do the door. And that's what I did, is I built that door from, that magazine. But it was there. It was part of my prayer that I needed to learn how to do that. And sometimes it comes through people. In this case, it came through a magazine. And that's where Master talks about, is we have to grasp the opportunities. Those are the opportunities that we have to look for. And we look for the opportunities because we expect them.
Mhm.
And that's that part of understanding that all this, although it's a potential, we have access to that potential. And
Mm.
it's so important that we have that. If we didn't have that, then we couldn't do this. And Master's teachings is all about that. It's that well-rounded balance between material as well as spiritual. So as we move along, uh, when I look back at my life, I realize that I've grown in both aspects.
Mm,
You know, you grow the material. I can do a lot of things that I couldn't do when I first came to Ananda materially, and I'm much more advanced in the spiritual practices. I didn't have to. We had the Ananda Builders Guild, which had 50 fellows, and it was $1 million company that Michael Gordink had built. And he asked me to take it over, which I did. And I thought about that. This was in 1990, and I came in 76. And I thought about that. Could I have taken that over and run the company in 1976 or even 1980? And the answer is no.
mm,
I didn't have enough experience. I didn't have enough material as well as spiritual to be able to sit there and manage. We took it to $3 million, a group of us, to manage a 1 million to $3 million company. But over the experience of the 15, 16 years before it happened, all those were those little steps that Master kept giving us. And the more that you put energy out to, like Swami says, say yes to life,
mhm,
that's what helps us to accomplish all this. The people that say no, that's where they make the mistake, or they feel that they can't do it. That's another thing that happens, or we doubt ourselves. Uh, and I think that's just part of life. I've had so many doubts, and I've had so many internal fights with myself to to really get myself balanced in the right way in order to take these things on. And a lot of it's a lot of prayer, a lot of it's a lot of meditation, and a lot of it's the visualization and the affirmations. I can't tell you, I remember once having about 10 different affirmations I used to carry on index cards. And every time I
mhm,
get one of these doubts in there, I go through to find the right affirmation, and I repeat it until I move from that doubt or that negative space into the
mm.
positive space.
It's-
And that's kind of what this life is like. It's not that one day you wake up and you're successful, or you're, in a sense of spirituality, of meditation. It's every day you're putting the right energy out and you're doing the right things. And one day you wake up and you say, wow, I've grown. Master said that to Swami. Swami realized after a certain period, he said, well, I've really grown. And Master says, well, look how I changed, Walter. And I've always felt that is Swami was there guiding us. And eventually we get to the point where, we change. But Swami could very easily have said to us, well, look how I changed Roy. And it would have been true. It would have been completely true.
Well, that's beautiful, Roy. I love the practical approach that you shared and with your story there, in that it's not, there's not going to be some grand leap, but it's going to be a day by day, the choices that you make. I love that story of saying yes to making the front door, and you know how to make the front door. But that's a great example of putting out the energy and then being supported by finding how to make it. So, yeah, I think that's one of the keys that you're helping us remember today is the importance of saying yes to life. Because there
Yeah.
are two competing, like you were sharing, there are two competing voices in our lives. There's a life affirming and a life negating one.
Mhm.
I always I resonate with that part of the Gita where Krishna says, I reveal this wisdom to you who have overcome the carping spirit. And I relate to you, having when those doubts come in, or a negative
Mm.
thought pattern, whatever it is, to shift it, to find that right index card affirmation,
Mm.
and put the energy in that positive opposite direction. But maybe this will be for one of our follow-up discussions when we have more guests joining us. But the discussion of magnetism is what you were. We have a few minutes left here, but maybe we could open it up to, you know, you were talking about the importance of attunement, being practical in your idealism, meditating, balance, body, mind, and soul, all of these things. Was there, not like it was one moment in time, but what I was sensing from the way you were sharing was that there became a shift in your magnetism, like when you had that opportunity in 1990 to take over the Ananda Builders Guild from Michael Gornick. You didn't have that confidence initially, but you built it up over time through your experience. And was it also, though, a shift in magnetism, in a shift in your, not just your material money magnetism, but your spiritual magnetism as well, to have that soul confidence to say, yes, I can do this and I'll step into this opportunity.
Right. That didn't come about, as the next step. Swami had me take over Earth Song, and I was studying, master's teachings and what Swami was doing, and I also was bringing along Think and Grow Rich, the Napoleon Hill aspect of the material. So I was still in both camps and wasn't in the one camp completely. I was still so when I started Earth Song, what I did is I started Earth Song from both perspectives. I wrote out the way Napoleon Hill says, this is how you be successful, and these are the 5 or 6 points that you have to write down and have. And I did that. And then I took Swami's aspect, and Swami says, well, this is what you need to do. So I did that. And then I went to work and I started to work both sides. And after about a month or maybe 6 weeks, I realized that I didn't like the aspect or the results that I was getting from the Think and Grow Rich side. It just wasn't balanced enough. It was only one-sided. And I liked what I was getting from Swami, which is more what you're talking about, is the magnetism. It was really uh, well-rounded. Now, Earth Song was a completely different situation to take over, and that's a whole different story for a different time. But I couldn't have done, nor had the attunement, what needed to be done if I wasn't doing the way Swami suggests and using magnetism as that. See, Napoleon Hill has desire, material desire, and that as the key point. Swami uses magnetism in the energy flow. I would have never been able to be successful at Earth Song and turn it around had I not followed Swami's way. So after about 6 months, I just put, I'm not 6 months, 6 weeks, I just put Napoleon Hill on the side and really focused just on what Swami was talking about. Was that was a big enough challenge in itself, because there were so many hurdles that we all had to get through. But I had good support through that. I had Vidura and Riemann was my 2 support people that would come down and meet with me. But it still was a lot of challenges, and I had a really good team, but it still was a lot of different steps. But again, it was using magnetism, and that's what Swami really talks about, is magnetism is really the key to what we're trying to do. And when he wrote the Material Success course, that's part of it. That's that underlying part that you have to really grasp and understand. There's the principles, but the principles really become clear and they become practical when we apply them with the understanding of magnetism.
Hmm.
So that's why I was suggesting having these type of group meetings or satsangs, however we end up doing this, because there's so many different levels to this. Even when you write a book, there's much more behind that
Hmm.
that you're to teach, but you have to put it down into a condensed fashion, and you know, nobody wants to read a 1,000-page book. You know, we'll read 100 or 200 pages, but there's so much more. There's so much depth, and Swami was like that too. Every time, every year, you would just pick up a different understanding, or a different level, or a different higher octave of energy. And that's what it was like. And Master, remember, was asked, is there an end? And he says, no, we go on until we reach endlessness.
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. It scares me. And at the same time, it really kind of gives you the confidence that, well, okay, this is just the flow of the whole thing. Don't get upset because you trip out here, or this didn't work, or it's just a stepping stone, and it's going to go on. So just enjoy it. I
Yeah.
think that was the biggest hurdle, or one of the biggest hurdles for me, was to just relax and enjoy the up and down. But remember, Master says, stay in the middle. You know, you're going to have the highs and you're going to have the lows. You know, I've had the high successes and I've had the low failures. But as long as I stayed in the middle, it was just fine. It was
Yeah.
just fine. I just wasn't affected by the whole thing.
Maybe that's one of the last things we can leave with people today is the even-minded and
Yes,
cheerful
yeah.
maxim. That kind of coming back to what you were sharing previously about staying balanced. If you
Hmm.
even minded and cheerful, you're in that balance, that golden middle path.
Right.
So
Yeah.
and in fact, that's really the wealth that the yogis are talking about, which is the joy of God. That's
Hmm.
the greatest wealth that we want to hold on all the time. So, Roy, thank you so much. This has been a really fun and engaging conversation, and we're going to be having more of these material success through yoga principles discussions with different guests, friends of ours, sharing from their experience, like yourself. Now, we don't have the book is being published in January of 2025. So for now, we'll put in the links below. Money Magnetism by Swami
Right.
Kriyananda,
Hmm.
How to Be a Success, which is one of the Wisdom of Yogananda series by Yogananda,
Hmm.
of course. Um,
Well, that book itself, How to Be Accessed by Master, is an excellent book. I've got that on my shelf, and I can't tell you how much that I pull that down and use it as reference. I mean, it's a small book, but it is packed with a lot of great ideas. And the other one is Supportive Leadership too, that is so important for us. And then I also have reread Cities of Light. That
mm,
has been another one. I'm not a big proponent because I'm more of a karma yogi than that. But Swami, of course, loves out of the labyrinth, and he says that's important to understand. So I think those people that have that aspect to their life, I think that's an important one to bring into the study too. And of course, money magnetism, I've used that over the years so much and get so much from that book. And it also helps me when we're having to actually put forth energy and get money in, how to do it. Because there's so many ways out there that people do it materially. And Swami has made it just through service. And wow, it relaxes you, and it works so perfectly because of that.
yeah,
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 so the study of all that, I think, is good to have before the course comes out in January.
yeah. There's a lot of nuance and depth, like you were sharing it from all those different books by Swami and Yogananda. Well, Roy, thank you so much for this conversation, and we'll be back next month, friends, with more discussion on material success through yoga principles.
Oh, good. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.